Good afternoon, folks. I am retrofitting the lace around the back of this gown for my client. As you can see, this side has already been cut and the lace has been repositioned. I'm just going to pull this back so you can see that where I'm going to cut this side so it matches up to that side. Other seamsters always ask me how to do this. It's very hard to explain, so I just decided that I would do a video on how to reposition the lace so that it fits. So you have to be careful because it can be very tricky. So the first thing you do is you need to cut the lace away from the tool if you can. Sometimes you can't. So that in itself is a whole nother issue. Probably what I would do if I was not able to cut the lace away from the tool, I probably would pass on the project, because a lot of times when you're cutting the lace away from the tool, you can get holes in it, and so you really don't want to take that chance unless you're able to replace all of the tool. But in most cases you're not, because of color match and things like that. And also because of your time and the cost. It may be, more cost effective if you just, tell the client perhaps they can get a different gown or, get a different, something that's closer to what it is that they want. It just, it just depends on you and your skill level, and if you're, willing to take the risk or not. So as you can see, I've cut away the lace from the tool. So now I'm going to cut the tool so that it matches up with the other side. You do want to make sure that it's lined up properly. So the best way to do that is to cut your buttons. Is to count your buttons. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's at the 6th buttonhole. So I'm going to cut the tool right there at the 6th buttonhole. And I'll cut from this side because it's much easier so I can see where I'm going. So you want to cut up like that, and you just want to cut a little bit at a time because you want to make sure that your sides match. So you want to cut this lace out there. I'm using small, very sharp scissors, but you can use a seam ripper. There's been cases where I've had to use a razor blade, but that can get very tricky as well. So you use whatever method is, most comfortable for you. Whatever you use, you just need to be extremely careful, because if it's a situation where you can't replace the lace and or any other part of the gown, then you're going to be in trouble, and then you're going to spend more time on it than it's really worth. So just be careful as you're taking the stitches out. In most cases they're very easy to get. The stitches are very easy to get out. So here's a piece of the lace. So I'm just going to put that to the side for now. And I'm just going to continue to cut to make sure that my sides are going to be even. And I'll put that to the side because that has a button on it. Never throw out anything because you don't know, what you're going to need in the end. So as you can see, it's kind of darted here, and so that's a place where I'm going to reposition the lace. As you can see, I've already done this side here, so I'm going to reposition the lace here. I'm going to move the mannequin over just a little bit. So what I want to do is, I know how much over I need to reposition it, so I'm going to cut this piece of lace out, this flower out right here. And it's much easier if you have lace that has flowers and things on it like that, because then it's easier to cut around it and reposition. Once it's sewn, no one will ever know that you that you cut it and reposition it and reposition the lace. You just take your time. There's other ways that you could do this, but I find this the most effective way to reposition the lace so that it is contoured to the client's body. But I've seen it done other ways. In fact, I learned to do it another way, but over the years, I've learned to do it this way, and this way just happens to work better for me. I tell people all the time that sewing is, you can learn the basics, but you know, once you start sewing and you build on your skill set, you can do it whatever way you want to do it, as long as it looks good and your client is happy with it. That's the, you know, that's the best way to do it. Don't sacrifice, you know, don't sacrifice quality though. You want to make sure that what you're doing is preserving the quality of the item that you're working on. So don't sacrifice the quality of the item, you know, for less time to deal with the whatever the issue is with the garment. I always err on the side, the caution side. It may take longer, but it's, you know, at the end result, the client is going to be happy with, and you don't want to have to go back and do anything, because time is money. So, you know, be efficient in the beginning so you won't have to go back and redo anything. So as you can see, I cut that. So now it's going to lay flat. I just need to cut it out a little bit here. Excuse me. Cut it out a little bit here so that it can lay flat. Excuse me. And you may have to cut it in several different areas to get it to lay flat so that it fits your client. And I'm going to cut this one out too, because it needs to be repositioned as well. It's actually too high. If you look, you see the line is right there. So this piece is actually too high. So it's actually pinned on the inside. So I'm going to remove the pin and finish cutting. So this is my line right here. This is where I want to be. See that? There's the line right there. So this is where I want to be. I want to be somewhere in there. So you just pin until you can get all your pieces laying flat. All the time my students always ask me, why do you pin? Why do you pin so much? Pinning is your best friend when you're sewing. Depending on what it is that I'm working on, I will pin, and I will also baste as I'm sewing. Just so happens that I don't need to do it for this particular project, but again, you do what you're comfortable doing, keeping in mind the amount of time that you're spending on the project. You don't want to do a whole lot of time on it, because then at that point you're wasting time, and you don't want to do that either. And if you have given the client an estimate of what it would be, then you want to stay as close to that as possible. You don't want to go over, even though you can go over, but you shouldn't go over. It shouldn't be extreme. If you're going to go over the quote, then I would say more than maybe $50 over what you've quoted the client. You need to have a conversation with her about it before you before you go any further. So be real clear about what it is that you're doing when you're having your consultation with your client, so that there are no surprises at the end. Because remember, when you're sewing, the end product is walking advertisement for you. So you want to be sure that the work that you are doing is good work, and also that you've been properly compensated for it. Because I can assure you that in conversations that the bride may have, or whoever your client is may have with someone else, she's going to tell that person how much she paid for the alterations. And if your work is not sufficient, or it doesn't add up, the client's going to talk about that too. She's going to say, well, she charged me X, Y, and Z, but I don't think the work was, up to that. So you just have to be extremely careful and make sure that your prices are matching up with the amount of work that you are doing. So if you follow me, you know that this past wedding season, I altered over 31 gowns, and most of them were referrals, which meant that I had worked on a gown for a client, and then she referred me to someone that she knew, or they found me on Yelp. And on Yelp, I have, there are reviews on my Yelp page. So that is very important. I can't stress that enough. Just make sure that you're quoting prices that are suitable to the amount of work that you're doing. Okay, so here's a little piece right here that I'm going to cut off because I don't need it. It doesn't need to be that long. So it's going to go right there. So see that? So now the sides look identical. There's that side and there's that side. And that's how you reposition the lace.